You ever come home from a completely normal workday, tired, hungry, already thinking about what you're going to eat, and then you pull into your driveway, and something just feels off, like your brain catches it before your eyes do, and then it hits you. There are strangers on your lawn, and they're not just standing there, they're tearing it apart. That was me, 11 years into living in this house, same quiet neighborhood, same predictable routine. And suddenly I'm staring at three guys with a skid loader ripping out rose bushes my wife had been growing for 7 years, not trimming, not relocating, ripping them out like weeds. And here's the part that makes it worse. They weren't random vandals. They weren't confused neighbors. They were hired by the HOA. Yeah, the HOA had decided that my yard was theirs. Now let me back up for a second because this didn't start as some dramatic feud. It started as one of those boring, invisible technical things nobody pays attention to: property lines, survey maps, paperwork that sits in a drawer collecting dust. When I bought this place over a decade ago, it was part of the first phase of a development, meaning half the neighborhood didn't even exist yet, just dirt lots and construction fencing. And because of that, the way the land was divided up wasn't perfect. My lot ended up a little different. Every other house on my side of the street had about 30 feet from the curb to their front door. Mine had 45, so an extra 15 feet that didn't really look like it belonged to me. It blended in with the grass strip the developers had already planted, so from the sidewalk it just looked like one continuous shared green space. And here's the key detail. Visually, it looked like common area. Legally, it was 100% mine. I knew that because unlike most people, I actually read my deed when I bought the place, and later on, when I refinanced, I had a survey done. Clear boundary markers, official documentation, no ambiguity. But I never made a big deal out of it. I mowed it. HOA maintained the actual common strip closer to the curb. Everyone stayed in their lane, no issues for years. Until we got a new HOA president. You know the type. Guy shows up to the annual meeting wearing a polo shirt with board member embroidered in gold like he just got promoted to regional manager of the universe. Wore it everywhere too: cookouts, mailbox, hardware store. I swear the man probably slept in it. And within months, he launched what he called a community enhancement initiative, which is HOA language for "we're about to spend a lot of your money on something nobody asked for." New landscaping plan, premium sod, irrigation systems, decorative trees. The whole thing came with a budget that made people shift in their seats a little, but he sold it as an investment in property value. And people went along with it. I didn't object, because again, none of that should have touched my yard. Or so I thought. Fast forward to that Tuesday. I pull up, see the crew, hear machinery running, and then I see it. My rose bush is gone. Half of them already in a pile, roots exposed, dirt everywhere. And there's this moment where your body wants to react before your brain catches up. You feel that spike, that heat, like you're about to snap. But I didn't. I walked over calmly and asked the crew leader what exactly they were doing. He pulls out a clipboard, shows me a map, my yard, highlighted, labeled Common Area B. And right there, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding from the workers. This came from the board. So I asked him where he got the map. He says the HOA provided it with the work order. I nod, tell him to pause for a few minutes while I make a call. And here's where things start shifting from emotional to strategic. Instead of arguing, I pulled out my phone and recorded him explaining the boundary they were given. On camera, clearly stating the HOA told them everything from the sidewalk to the house belonged to the community unless marked otherwise. Then I went inside and called the HOA president. He picks up, already irritated, like he knew exactly why I was calling. And before I can even finish explaining, he cuts me off. Look, we're improving the neighborhood. This is a free upgrade to your property value. You should be thanking us instead of making this difficult. That tone, that dismissive, condescending tone, like I was some obstacle in his little project. I try to explain, calmly, that the land they're working on is mine, not common property. He talks over me again. Says the board reviewed the plat map. Says they know what they're doing. And here's the thing. I live in a one-party consent state. So yeah, that call was recorded too. Now at this point, I had options. I could have walked right back outside with my survey documents, shut everything down immediately, maybe even called the police for trespassing, and legally, I would have been completely justified. But instead, I stood there in my kitchen for about 60 seconds, just thinking. And then it hit me. This wasn't just a mistake. This was an opportunity. Because what was actually happening in real time was the HOA was about to spend thousands of dollars of community funds upgrading private property. My property. So instead of stopping them, I let them keep going. Yeah, I called my wife, explained the situation. First reaction, she was upset about the roses, which, fair, those meant something to her. But then she paused and said the exact same thing I was thinking. Let them finish. So that's exactly what we did. We documented everything, photos, videos, timestamps, and just waited. And over the next 2 weeks, they transformed my yard. Premium sod, full irrigation system with its own control zone. 3 Japanese maple trees that I later found out were going for about $1,600 each, stone edging, the works. By the time they were done, my front yard didn't look like a yard anymore. It looked like the entrance to a resort. And the entire time, the HOA thought they were improving community property. But they weren't. They were investing in mine. And they had no idea how big of a mistake they had just made. Now, before we jump back into the story, let me break something down real quick, because this is where things go from annoying HOA drama to serious legal exposure. According to standard procedure, an HOA is only allowed to spend community funds on property that is officially designated as common area. That means land they actually own or are legally responsible for maintaining, not something that just looks like it belongs to everyone. There's a huge difference there. From a legal perspective, what the board did here isn't just a harmless mistake. It can fall under something called misappropriation of funds. Basically, they took money from all the homeowners and used it on something they had zero authority over. And that's where things get dangerous for them, because in a lot of cases, board members can be held personally liable, not just the HOA as an entity. And psychologically, this is a classic power trap. This is a psychological trap where someone in a small position of authority starts overestimating their control. They stop verifying details, they assume they're right, and they double down when challenged, especially when their identity gets tied to being the one in charge. That HOA president? He wasn't just managing a project, he was protecting his ego. And that is exactly why he didn't stop when he should have. So for about 10 days, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The landscaping was done. The yard looked incredible. The HOA hadn't said a word to me. And for a second, it almost felt like maybe they were just going to pretend none of this ever happened. And honestly, I would have been fine with that. But then, they pushed it too far. A flyer shows up in my mailbox. Glossy paper, HOA logo at the top, bold headline about a community enhancement milestone. And right there in the middle, a diagram. A diagram of a stone monument sign they planned to install at the entrance of the neighborhood. And guess where that entrance was marked? Dead center of my front yard. I actually laughed out loud when I saw it, not because it was funny, but because it was so unbelievably bold, like they had learned absolutely nothing. They had already landscaped my property by mistake, and now they were about to build a permanent structure on it. That's not a landscaping error anymore. That's escalation. And this time, I wasn't going to just sit back and watch. The install was scheduled for Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. I was up at 6:00, showered, coffee made, documents laid out on the table like I was preparing for court, certified plat map, property, deed, photos, recordings, everything organized. By 7:45, I was sitting in a lawn chair, right in the middle of that freshly landscaped yard, just waiting. There's something about being completely calm in a situation where someone else expects compliance. It throws people off. Right at 8:00, 2 trucks pull up, flatbed loaded with stone blocks, bags of mortar, full crew ready to go. The crew lead walks over, polite, professional. Hey, are you the homeowner? I nod. He tells me they have a work order to install the neighborhood sign on this lot. And I just say, yeah, I'm aware that's what they think. Then I hand him a copy of the certified plat map, boundary line highlighted in bright yellow. And I explain, calmly, clearly, no emotion, that the ground he's standing on is private property, not HOA common area, and that any attempt to break ground without my permission would constitute trespassing. No yelling, no threats, just facts. He looks at the map, looks at his paperwork, looks back at me, and I can see it in his face. Something doesn't line up. So he steps aside and makes a call. About 12 minutes later, the HOA president shows up. still wearing that same embroidered polo. And he doesn't even slow down as he walks up. He starts talking before he gets to me. Something about interfering with community improvements, unauthorized obstruction, all that rehearsed authority language. I let him finish, didn't interrupt once. Then I handed him the same plat map, and I said, "Go ahead, show me where Common Area B is." He takes it, studies it, and there's this moment, subtle but unmistakable, where his shoulders drop just a little. That's the moment he understood. But I explained it anyway, slowly, clearly, like you would to someone who's about to make a very expensive mistake. This land is not Common Area B. It's my property. It's on my deed. The HOA just spent somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 improving land it doesn't own. And now you're attempting to build a permanent structure on it without permission. No sarcasm, no attitude, just reality. And then I gave him the part that really mattered. I told him that under the HOA's own bylaws, what they had already done could be considered misappropriation of community funds, that every homeowner in the neighborhood had paid dues that were used, incorrectly, on private property. And that if even one of those homeowners decided to look into it, or worse, take legal action, he wouldn't just be defending the HOA. He'd be defending himself. Personally, he tried to respond. Something about acting in good faith, about relying on the map they had. And I let him talk. Then I asked him a simple question. Do you want to explain that good faith argument to 47 homeowners when they see the actual plat map? That's when everything stopped. The crew wasn't moving, trucks idling, tools untouched. The crew lead makes another call, then comes back and says they're going to need written authorization before proceeding. And just like that, they start packing up. Stone blocks back on the truck, equipment loaded, job canceled. The HOA president just stood there, in my yard, staring at the map. And then finally, he looks at me and says, "What do you want?" That's the moment where most people go for blood. Demand money, threaten lawsuits, push as hard as possible. But I didn't answer right away. I told him I'd think about it. Then I went inside and called my attorney. We talked for about an hour. Not in legal jargon, just practical strategy. And she laid it out for me in a way that made everything crystal clear. From a legal perspective, the HOA was in a very weak position. They had violated their fiduciary duty, meaning they failed to act in the financial interest of the homeowners they represent. They had spent shared funds on private property. They had destroyed existing property, my rose bushes, based on a false claim. And they had almost escalated it further by attempting construction. And here's the key part. They didn't just have a problem with me. They had a problem with every single homeowner in that neighborhood. Because that money, it wasn't theirs. It belonged to everyone. And if this got out, if people started asking questions at the next HOA meeting, it wouldn't just be awkward. It would be a liability nightmare. Which meant one thing. I had leverage. A lot of it. But here's where most people mess up. They think leverage means you squeeze as hard as possible. It doesn't. Leverage means you control the outcome. So instead of going after them, I designed an exit for them. 2 days later, I texted the HOA president, written record, clean, simple. I told him I had a proposal. I wasn't going to report the board to the homeowners. I wasn't going to file a claim for the destroyed plants. I wasn't going to pursue legal action. In exchange, I wanted one thing. A maintenance agreement. 10 years. The HOA would be responsible for everything. Upkeep, irrigation, water costs, trimming, replacements, all of it. Because the way I framed it, they had already made the investment. I wasn't asking them to undo anything. I wasn't asking for money. I was asking them to take responsibility for what they had already done. And I gave him 5 days to respond. Now, during those 5 days, something interesting happened. My neighbor, the one right next to me, comes over while I'm getting the mail. She had been watching the whole landscaping process, clearly confused. She asks if the HOA did some kind of special upgrade just for my house. I told her the truth. They thought it was common area. She pauses, then says she remembers the total landscaping budget being around $14,000 for the entire neighborhood. Then she looks at my yard and says it looks like more than half of that went right here. I just nodded, didn't say much. And then she asked the question, should people know about this? And I told her, calmly, that I was sure the board would handle it appropriately, but if they didn't, then yes, the homeowners absolutely had a right to know. That conversation, yeah, that definitely made its way back to the board. Because 3 days later, not 5, I get a response. They agree in principle, but they want to reduce it to 5 years. I said no, 10 years, or we skip the agreement, and I bring the documentation to the next HOA meeting. And I let the community decide how they feel about where their money went. That was it. No threats, no yelling, just options. And a day later, they agreed. The agreement was drafted by my attorney, reviewed by theirs, signed in a special session. Done. The sign? Yeah, that ended up across the street, on an actual strip of HOA-owned land, squeezed awkwardly between a utility box and the curb. Looks significantly less impressive than what they had planned. And my yard still looks like a resort entrance. The trees filled in, irrigation runs automatically, landscaping crew shows up every few weeks like clockwork. I don't touch a thing. I just sit on the porch, wave, and enjoy it. The HOA president still lives here, still wears the polo. But now, when he walks past my house, he crosses the street, and we're polite. In that very specific way people are polite, when they both know exactly what happened. And neither one of them wants to bring it up again. And honestly, I'm perfectly fine with that. So yeah, on the surface, this whole thing sounds like a win. Free landscaping, 10 years of maintenance, HOA quietly backing off, problem solved. But if you zoom out a little, this wasn't really about the yard. It was about understanding the system you're in, and knowing exactly when to push and when to wait. Because most people, and I mean most, would have reacted the moment those rose bushes got ripped out. They would have stormed outside, started yelling, maybe called the cops, shut everything down immediately. And look, that reaction would have been justified. But it also would have been short-term thinking. The lesson here is, sometimes the strongest move isn't stopping the mistake. It's letting it fully happen, so the consequences become undeniable. Because once the HOA finished that landscaping, they weren't just wrong. They were invested in being wrong. And that changes everything. Now let's talk about something a lot of people don't realize about HOAs. According to standard procedure, HOA boards operate on authority that's actually pretty limited. They feel powerful because they enforce rules, but legally, they're bound by very specific documents, bylaws, CC and AMP, RS, and recorded plats. They can't just decide what land belongs to them. They have to prove it. And most homeowners never check. That's the gap. That's where mistakes, or abuse, happen. From a legal perspective, what protected me here wasn't luck. It was documentation. The deed, the survey, the certified plat map. Those weren't just papers, they were leverage. Because in any dispute like this, the person with verifiable records controls the narrative. Not the loudest voice. Not the most confident person in a polo shirt. The one with proof. And here's the psychological layer that makes this even more interesting. This is a psychological trap that shows up in a lot of small power structures, not just HOAs. When someone gets a position with just enough authority to enforce rules, but not enough oversight to keep them in check, they start identifying with the role. They stop questioning themselves. And when someone challenges them, they don't see it as new information. They see it as resistance. So they double down. That's exactly what happened here. The HOA president wasn't trying to be malicious, at least not at first. He genuinely believed he was improving the neighborhood. But once that belief got challenged, it became personal. And instead of verifying the facts, he defended the decision. That's how small mistakes turn into big problems. And if you're dealing with anything like this, HOA, landlord, management, even workplace dynamics, there's something really important to understand. You don't win by arguing harder. You win by changing the incentives. The moment I stopped trying to convince him he was wrong and started showing him what it would cost to continue being wrong, the entire situation flipped. That's leverage, not aggression. And here's another piece people overlook. I didn't go after money. I didn't try to punish them, because that would have triggered defense mode, lawyers, delays, escalation. Instead, I offered them a way out, a solution that made sense for them while still benefiting me. That's the part most people miss. The goal isn't to destroy the other side. It's to make cooperation the easiest option available. And once that happens, resolution becomes almost automatic. Now, I did send them that $960 consulting invoice afterward. Not because I expected them to pay it, they didn't, but because it made a point. It put in writing that my time had value, that their mistake had cost something real, and that I was fully aware of both. Sometimes, That kind of message matters more than the money. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. The lesson here is slow down before you react, especially when you're right. Because being right isn't enough. You need timing, documentation, and a strategy. And yeah, not every situation is going to end with free landscaping and 10 years of maintenance. But the principle still applies. Understand the rules better than the people enforcing them. Stay calm when they expect you to escalate. And when the moment comes, make your move count. Now I'm curious. If you were in that situation, would you have stopped them immediately? Or would you have let it play out and gone for the long game? Drop your answer below. I read all of them. And if you've ever had a run-in with an HOA, I already know you've got a story. Let's hear it.